Have you ever wondered what secrets lie behind the walls of Buckingham Palace? Secrets so profound they could shake the very foundation of the British monarchy? When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, the world mourned the loss of a beloved monarch. But behind the public displays of grief, a private moment was unfolding, one that would leave the royal family grappling with the weight of her final wishes. What revelations were hidden in her will? Who among her family would be entrusted with her most cherished treasures? And how would these decisions reshape the future of the monarchy forever? Prepare to dive into the untold story of the Queen's last will, a document that didn't just divide her estate, but redefined the legacy of the royal family. The answers will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about Britain's most iconic institution. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away, it wasn't just the end of a reign. It was the end of an era that spanned over 7 decades. Her steadfast presence had been a cornerstone of British identity, a bridge between tradition and modernity, and a symbol of unity in times of uncertainty. But even as the world mourned the loss of a beloved monarch behind the gilded doors of Buckingham Palace, a sense of unease took hold. For while her passing marked the close of one chapter, it also opened the door to long-buried secrets that would soon come to light. The Queen's will, a document shrouded in mystery, carried the weight of her legacy and the future of the monarchy itself. It wasn't just about wealth or titles. It was about the delicate balance of tradition and evolution that the royal family would have to navigate in her absence. In the days following her death, speculation ran rampant. What had the Queen left behind? And who would be entrusted with her most treasured possessions and responsibilities? As the somber rituals unfolded, flags at half-mast, crowds gathering outside royal residences, and a nation in mourning, there was a growing curiosity about what would come next. The royal family, known for its stoic facade, seemed unusually guarded. Insiders whispered of meetings behind closed doors, where emotions ran high, and the stakes felt higher still. The reading of the Queen's will, it seemed, was not merely a formality, but an event that could alter the course of the monarchy. When the day finally arrived, Buckingham Palace exuded an atmosphere of quiet tension. In the grand but somber setting of the palace library, members of the royal family gathered. Prince William, now a cornerstone of the monarchy's future, was to take on a responsibility unlike any other, reading the late Queen's final wishes. For William, this moment was not just a duty, it was deeply personal. He had been a beloved grandson, a confidant, and in many ways, the embodiment of the values his grandmother had championed. Yet, as he prepared to read the document, there was an unmistakable air of apprehension. The room was heavy with anticipation as the family assembled. King Charles III, stoic and measured. Camilla, watchful. Catherine, graceful, yet contemplative. And then there were the quieter figures, the younger generation and those who had stepped back from public life, each present for a moment that would undoubtedly shape their futures. As William unfolded the crisp parchment, the rustle of the paper was the only sound in the room. It was a scene that could have been plucked from a period drama, yet its implications were as real as the regal portraits that adorned the walls. The first words of the will sent a ripple through the room. They were not merely about material wealth or titles, but carried a tone of foresight and deliberation. It was clear that the Queen had thought deeply about the impact of her decisions. Every allocation, every word, seemed to serve a purpose, a map for the monarchy's evolution in a rapidly changing world. Yet the surprises began almost immediately. Balmoral Castle, the cherished Scottish retreat where the Queen had spent so many summers, was not simply handed down to King Charles as many had assumed. Instead, the will hinted at a more complex arrangement, one that could involve multiple generations of the family. The implications of this decision were staggering. For Charles, it was a reminder that his mother's vision extended far beyond his reign. For William, it was the first inkling that his role as future monarch would carry responsibilities unlike any before him. The murmurs in the room grew louder as other details emerged. Some of the Queen's personal treasures, items with deep sentimental and historical value, were to be allocated to family members outside the direct line of succession. It was a decision that underscored her commitment to unity, but also one that raised eyebrows. These were not ordinary inheritances. They were pieces of history, imbued with meaning and memory. As William continued, his voice steady but his eyes betraying the weight of the moment, the family listened intently. For some, the revelations brought smiles of recognition, while for others, there were furrowed brows and silent exchanges. What was clear, even in these early moments, was that the Queen's will was not just a document but a message, a final act of leadership that sought to preserve the monarchy while adapting it to an ever-evolving society. The anticipation in the room was palpable. This was only the beginning, yet the ripples of what had been revealed were already spreading. William paused, taking a breath as he prepared to delve deeper into the contents of the will. What lay ahead would not only reshape the family's immediate future but also raise profound questions about their place in the world. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier with every word William read. The Queen's will was proving to be far more than a straightforward list of inheritances. It was a tapestry of intentions, a carefully constructed map of her hopes for the monarchy's future. Yet, it was not without its surprises. Even those closest to her could not have anticipated the extent of her foresight or the weight of the decisions she had left behind. One of the earliest revelations centered around Balmoral Castle, a place steeped in personal and historical significance. It had been more than just a royal residence. It was a sanctuary where the Queen had shared cherished moments with her family, away from the prying eyes of the public. But as William read on, it became clear that Balmoral would not simply be handed down to King Charles as many had assumed. Instead, the will detailed a more intricate arrangement, one that hinted at a shared responsibility among multiple family members. This decision, while pragmatic, raised immediate questions. Was it a gesture of unity, or was it a strategic move to safeguard the estate's legacy? Sandringham, too, emerged as a focal point. The Norfolk estate, famous for hosting the royal family's Christmas celebrations, had been a cornerstone of their traditions for generations. Yet the Queen's will suggested a shift. Rather than passing directly to the next monarch, it seemed that Sandringham might play a different role in the family's future. The exact details were still unfolding, but the implications were profound. These were not just houses or pieces of land, they were symbols of continuity, places where the monarchy's history and future intersected. As William continued, the focus shifted to the Queen's financial legacy. For years, her wealth had been a subject of speculation. While the Crown Estate and the Duchy of Lancaster were well-documented sources of royal income, her personal fortune remained shrouded in mystery. Investments, private collections, and discreet business ventures had quietly amassed impressive wealth. Now, for the first time, the extent of her financial holdings was laid bare. Yet it wasn't just the scale of her fortune that caught the family off guard, it was the way it was to be distributed. The Queen's will revealed an emphasis on balance, ensuring that wealth was allocated in a way that reflected her commitment to both tradition and adaptation. Some family members would inherit shares of her private investments, while others were entrusted with managing her personal art collection. The reasoning behind these choices was clear. The Queen wanted her legacy to endure, not just through her heirs, but through the preservation of culture and history. The art collection in particular sparked murmurs around the room. It included works by renowned masters like Rembrandt and Vermeer, pieces that had not been part of the Crown's holdings but had been privately acquired over the years. The will specified which family members would inherit these treasures, and the selections were anything but predictable. Rather than simply passing them to the next monarch, the Queen had chosen individuals she believed would appreciate their cultural significance and ensure their legacy. It was a decision that spoke volumes about her priorities. But perhaps the most emotionally charged moment came when the subject turned to the Queen's jewelry. Her collection, a dazzling array of tiaras, necklaces, and brooches, had been the subject of fascination for decades. These were not just ornaments, they were heirlooms with stories that spanned generations. The Vladimir tiara, for instance, carried a history as rich as the gemstones that adorned it. Who would inherit such iconic pieces? The answer was more complex than anyone had anticipated. Some jewels were to be passed down to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, who had already begun embracing her role as a future queen consort. Others were allocated to family members outside the immediate line of succession. a decision that raised eyebrows and sparked quiet speculation. Yet, as surprising as these choices were, they underscored the Queen's intent to maintain unity and balance within the family. It wasn't just about who wore the jewels, it was about what they represented. William's voice remained steady, but there was a palpable weight to his words. He understood that each revelation carried consequences, not just for the individuals involved, but for the monarchy as a whole. The Queen's will was shaping up to be a document of both continuity and change, a delicate balance that reflected her understanding of the challenges the family would face in the years to come. As the reading continued, the atmosphere in the room shifted. There was curiosity, of course, but also an undercurrent of tension. Each new detail seemed to peel back another layer of the Queen's intentions, offering a glimpse into her private thoughts and priorities. For some, these revelations were affirming. For others, they raised questions about their place within the family and the future of the monarchy itself. By the time William paused to take a breath, it was clear that the will had only begun to reveal its secrets. The Queen's vision was unfolding piece by piece, and while it offered clarity in some areas, it left much to be interpreted. The family exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement of the enormity of what lay ahead. This was not just about inheritance, it was about legacy, responsibility, and the delicate balance of tradition and progress. And yet, there was still more to come. The deeper William delved, the more the will seemed to challenge expectations and reshape the narrative of the royal family's future. What would the next revelation bring? And how would the family reconcile the weight of their history with the demands of a changing world? As the evening light filtered through the grand windows of Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier with the weight of the Queen's words. Each passing moment seemed to peel back another layer of her intentions, and with every revelation, the boundaries between tradition and transformation blurred further. For the royal family, these were not mere instructions. They were a roadmap to their future, shaped by the wisdom and vision of a monarch who had seen the world change in unimaginable ways. The focus of the will now shifted to the deeply personal treasures that had defined the Queen's life. Among these were her priceless heirlooms, each imbued with its own history and significance. These were not just possessions, they were symbols of a legacy stretching back through centuries of British history. As William read on, it became clear that these items were not to be distributed arbitrarily. Every choice the Queen had made carried meaning, reflecting her relationships, her values, and her hopes for the monarchy. The Queen's jewelry collection was the centerpiece of this segment, and its allocation was as much about symbolism as it was about sentiment. Tiaras that had graced state banquets and brooches that had become synonymous with her public appearances were among the items listed. The Vladimir tiara, a favorite of the Queen's and a piece with a storied history, stood out. It was said to carry not only immense monetary value but also a connection to her personal identity as a monarch and a woman of deep historical awareness. The question on everyone's mind was, who would inherit such a treasure? The answer was not as straightforward as one might expect. Some pieces were to be passed down to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, marking her role as the future Queen Consort. Yet others were destined for family members outside the direct line of succession, a gesture that seemed to reflect the Queen's desire for inclusivity and unity within the family. Each allocation appeared to be a deliberate act, designed to preserve the significance of these items while ensuring they remained symbols of continuity and heritage. Beyond the jewelry, the Queen's private art collection came into focus. This collection, amassed over decades, included works by masters like Rembrandt and Vermeer, pieces that had been quietly admired within the palace walls but rarely seen by the public. These were not part of the official crown collection, but personal acquisitions, each chosen for its beauty and historical significance. The will revealed that these treasures would not simply remain in the family vaults. Instead, they were to be entrusted to specific family members who had shown an appreciation for art and culture. This decision surprised many, as it deviated from traditional practices. Rather than consolidating these treasures under the authority of the reigning monarch, the Queen had chosen to distribute them more widely, ensuring their cultural and historical value would be appreciated by future generations. It was a move that spoke to her understanding of the evolving role of the monarchy in a modern world. These pieces were not just reminders of the past, they were tools to shape the future, a legacy that extended beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. Yet even as these revelations unfolded, the atmosphere in the room was far from celebratory. There was a quiet tension, an unspoken acknowledgement of the challenges these decisions might bring. While some family members welcomed their inheritances with gratitude, others exchanged furtive glances, their expressions betraying a mix of surprise and unease. For them, the will was not just a set of instructions. It was a reflection of where they stood in the Queen's eyes and their place in the ever-shifting dynamics of the royal family. Among the most poignant moments was the mention of smaller, deeply personal items, letters, photographs, and mementos that carried sentimental value far beyond their material worth. These were the pieces of the Queen's life that had rarely been seen, even by her closest confidants. Their distribution was a reminder that beneath the crown, she had been a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, a figure whose love for her family had often been expressed in quiet, private ways. William's voice softened as he read these passages, aware of the emotions they might stir. For the younger generation, these inheritances were an invitation to connect with the Queen's life and values on a deeply personal level. For those who had spent decades by her side, they were a bittersweet reminder of a relationship that had been both personal and symbolic. The room seemed to hold its breath as the family absorbed the significance of these gestures, their silence speaking volumes. Yet, as with every revelation in the will, these deeply personal items were not without their implications. Whispers spread among the family about what these choices might mean, who had been favored, who had been overlooked, and what unspoken messages lay within the Queen's final wishes. The unity that the Queen had sought to preserve now felt tenuous, as the lines between tradition, sentiment, and strategy became increasingly blurred. The reading continued into the evening, and with every turn of the page, the Queen's vision became clearer. She had sought to balance the weight of history with the need for progress, ensuring that her legacy would endure not only through her heirs but also through the values and traditions she had championed. Yet the deeper William delved, the more it became apparent that this was no ordinary inheritance. The Queen's final act of leadership was as complex and multifaceted as the reign she had overseen, and its impact would reverberate through the family and the monarchy for years to come. The mood in the room shifted as the will began to address matters of an even more personal nature, venturing into the territory of family relationships and the legacies they carried. Among the most anticipated revelations was the mention of Prince Harry. For years, his decisions to step away from royal duties and the life he had been born into had created ripples that extended far beyond the palace walls. The Queen's relationship with Harry had been a subject of much speculation, and now her will offered a rare glimpse into her thoughts about her grandson and his place in the family's future. When Harry's name was spoken, the room grew noticeably still. His inheritance, while modest compared to others in monetary terms, was deeply symbolic. He had been left a ceremonial sword, a relic from the time of King George V, a piece of history that carried with it connotations of service, strength, and resilience. The sword was not just an artifact. It was a reminder of Harry's military service, his commitment to causes he held dear, and perhaps a subtle acknowledgement of his struggles to reconcile his role as a prince with his own personal identity. For Harry, this gesture was bittersweet. The sword spoke of honor and history, but it also highlighted the distance he had created from the institution that defined much of his life. While some in the family saw the inheritance as a symbolic olive branch, others questioned its implications. Was it a message of reconciliation, or was it a reminder of what he had left behind? The ambiguity lingered in the air, mirroring the unresolved tensions between Harry and the family. The reactions to this inheritance varied, as did the undercurrents of emotion it brought to the surface. For William, it was another burden to bear, the delicate balance of supporting his brother while upholding the expectations of the monarchy. For King Charles, it was a reflection of his mother's hope to keep the family united, despite the fractures that had formed over the years. And for Harry himself, it was a moment of reflection, one that would undoubtedly shape how he moved forward in his life outside the royal fold. Yet the Queen's will was not only about bridging divides, it also illuminated the inevitable divisions that arise in a family of such prominence. As more details emerged, it became clear that some family members had been left with significantly less than they might have expected. Whispers began to circulate about what this might mean for the dynamics within the family. Those who had received prominent inheritances, properties, heirlooms, and symbols of the monarchy's history now found themselves under scrutiny, while those who felt overlooked wrestled with feelings of resentment and exclusion. William, who had thus far carried the responsibility of reading the will with grace and composure, began to feel the strain of what this document represented. It was not just a record of the Queen's final wishes. It was a mirror reflecting the complexities of a family bound by duty, yet fractured by differing priorities and ambitions. The weight of these revelations bore down on him, not just as a grandson, but as the future king who would have to navigate the aftermath of these decisions. The Queen's choices were not without strategy. It became increasingly clear that she had intended her will to serve as more than a legal document. It was a carefully constructed narrative, designed to preserve the monarchy's relevance, while honoring the relationships that mattered most to her. Yet this very strategy also exposed the fault lines within the family. The tensions that had simmered beneath the surface for years now threatened to erupt as the implications of the will unfolded. Amid these dynamics, Catherine emerged as a steadying presence. Her inheritance, which included several iconic pieces of jewelry and personal items, was both a reflection of her role as the future queen consort and a nod to her growing influence within the family. As William's partner, she had become a central figure in shaping the next generation of the monarchy, and the Queen's choices reflected her trust in Catherine to carry forward her legacy with dignity and grace. Yet even this gesture was not without its challenges. Catherine's elevated status only highlighted the contrasts within the family, drawing further attention to the disparities in how the Queen's legacy was distributed. By the time the focus shifted back to William, the atmosphere in the room had grown increasingly charged. His role in the monarchy, already weighty, now seemed even more pivotal. The will had made it abundantly clear that William was not just the heir to the throne, but the linchpin in the family's future. His inheritance went beyond material wealth. It was a mandate to preserve the monarchy's values while steering it into uncharted territory. Properties, artifacts, and even symbolic gestures all pointed to his central role in ensuring the monarchy's survival in an era of profound change. As the evening wore on, it became evident that the Queen's final act of leadership had succeeded in one crucial regard. It had sparked reflection among those she left behind. Her choices, whether they brought unity or unease, had forced the family to confront their roles within the institution and their relationships with one another. For William, this was both a burden and a calling, an opportunity to honor his grandmother's vision while forging his own path as the future monarch. Yet, the Queen's will was not done revealing its secrets. With each word that followed, the balance between tradition and transformation became ever more precarious. What would the final chapters of her hold? And how would the family reconcile the weight of her legacy with the need to adapt to a rapidly changing world? As the final pages of the Queen's will came into view, the tension in the room reached its peak. The family, each carrying their own mix of emotions, anticipation, apprehension, and curiosity, prepared for the last of the revelations. What had begun as a formal reading had transformed into an intimate moment of reflection on the legacy of a woman who had steered the monarchy through decades of change. Yet, with so much already uncovered, there was still an air of expectation. The final words of the Queen's testament would not just conclude this chapter, but shape the monarchy for generations to come. William, who had carried the weight of reading the will with composure, hesitated briefly before continuing. What lay ahead was deeply personal, both for him and for the entire royal family. These final instructions were not just about material inheritances or symbolic gestures. They were about the vision the Queen had for the monarchy's future, entrusted to those she believed would carry her legacy forward with integrity and purpose. Among the last allocations were specific instructions for the younger generation, George, Charlotte, and Louis. Though still children, the Queen had outlined her hopes for their roles within the monarchy. Education, personal development, and the nurturing of values such as duty, compassion, and resilience were emphasized. These were not just aspirations. but a carefully considered roadmap designed to prepare them for the responsibilities they would one day inherit. For George in particular, as the future king, her words carried a tone of gentle guidance, a reminder that leadership required both strength and humility. The Queen's will also addressed the broader structure of the monarchy, emphasizing the importance of unity and adaptability in a rapidly changing world. She had seen firsthand the challenges posed by shifting public sentiment and evolving societal norms. Her instructions reflected her understanding that the monarchy could no longer rely solely on tradition to remain relevant. It needed to evolve while holding on to the values that had defined it for centuries. This was perhaps the most significant aspect of her legacy, the delicate balance between preserving the past and embracing the future. For King Charles III, the final passages of the will were both a reaffirmation of his position and a challenge to uphold his mother's vision. The Queen had entrusted him with not only the tangible assets of the monarchy, estates, finances, and artifacts, but also the responsibility to guide the family through an era of transformation. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier, and yet her words seemed to offer a sense of reassurance. She believed in his ability to lead, even as she acknowledged the complexities of his role. Yet it was William who bore the most profound responsibility. As the will came to a close, it became clear that his grandmother had placed her greatest trust in him. Beyond the inheritance of properties and heirlooms, she had left him with the task of bridging the old and the new, ensuring that the monarchy remained a unifying force in an increasingly fragmented world. Her final words to him, written with care and thought, spoke not just of duty, but of the love and confidence she had in his ability to carry forward her legacy. The Queen's will also offered unexpected moments of humanity. Among the last items mentioned were her private diaries, volumes she had kept throughout her life, chronicling her thoughts, experiences, and reflections as both a monarch and a woman. These diaries, entrusted to William, were to remain private, a personal gift that offered him an intimate glimpse into her inner world. It was a gesture that spoke of their unique bond, a reminder of the trust she had placed in him not only as a future king, but as her grandson. As the reading concluded, the room fell into a contemplative silence. Each member of the family was left to process what they had heard, reflecting on their own place within this intricate web of legacy and responsibility. For some, the will had brought clarity and a sense of purpose. For others, it had raised questions about their roles and relationships. But for all of them, it was a moment to acknowledge the magnitude of what the Queen had left behind, a legacy that extended far beyond material wealth. The Queen's final act of leadership had been to unite her family one last time, guiding them with the wisdom and grace that had defined her reign. She had left behind more than treasures and titles. She had left a vision for the monarchy's future and a reminder of the values that had made her an enduring symbol of strength and stability. As William folded the final page of the will, he looked up at his family, his expression a mixture of resolve and emotion. He understood, perhaps more than anyone, the depth of what had just been entrusted to him. The monarchy's future, its ability to endure and evolve, now rested on their collective shoulders. The decisions they made in the days and years to come would determine whether they could uphold the legacy of a queen who had dedicated her life to the service of her people. Outside the palace, the world continued to mourn, celebrate, and reflect on the life of Queen Elizabeth II. Yet within its walls, her family began to prepare for the next chapter, one shaped by her final wishes and the enduring power of her example. The Queen's legacy, though no longer embodied in her presence, remained alive in the values she had instilled and the vision she had left behind. As the family dispersed from the library, a quiet determination seemed to settle over them. The era of Queen Elizabeth II had ended, but her influence would continue to guide the monarchy through whatever lay ahead. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come that far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.